For centuries, Russia's size was its superpower, and now, for the first time, that's become its weakness. Its land was so wide, it swallowed armies. In 1708, Sweden's king charges in hot, then freezes in mud, stopped by Russia's endless miles and a winter that bites through the bone. And in 1812, Napoleon stormed towards Moscow with one of the best armies in Europe. Russians torched their own supplies and pulled back. They stretched his lines thin. Then the snow melted and came seas of mud. Napoleon retreats, and 600,000 soldiers that marched in, a fraction limped out. And in 1941, Hitler's blitzkrieg hits a wall of geography. Supply lines snap, engines freeze, and at Stalingrad, the soldiers get stuck in the snow. That's always been the pattern. Distance, climate, and scale has protected Russia until now. Because now, drones don't care about distance or mud. They don't need fuel convoys, they don't need barracks. They fly low, cheap, and far, hitting oil refineries, air bases, and logistics hubs hundreds, if not thousands of kilometers from the front line. And for the first time in Russia's history, the thing that saved it, sheer scale, could be the thing that breaks it. And not because anyone marches on Moscow, because modern war flies over the map and burns the pins. It's a country so large, air defense systems can't possibly stretch across 11 time zones. And as of today, nearly 38% of all of its oil refining capabilities have been taken out. And oil is what pays for this war. And if this carries on, things are going to get extremely difficult in Russia. And everyday Russians, they can adapt to living in poverty. They can adapt to living in squalor. The Soviet Union was an example of this. But a military that's paid $2,500 per month per head isn't going to keep fighting if it isn't getting paid. So I decided to speak to my good friend Jake Bro to break down the whole situation on Russia's weak spots. Its weak spots in terms of its size, but also right now, its weak spots politically. Putin standing on the world stage. So I sat down with Jake and got his thoughts on where all this is going. Jake, thank you so much for joining me. And in the last few minutes, we've just been talking about the fifth largest oil refinery in Russia being hit, Yaroslavl Oblast, which has an output of about 15.7 million tons, 700 kilometers inside Russia. And this is, and you always show this bingo board of all these different refineries that are getting hit. This one's been hit for the first time now. This is a constant theme every 24 hours that I've been seeing. How long do you think Russia can sustain these attacks for? And do you think there's any way currently, with Russia's capabilities, that they can somehow adapt to this, that they can somehow stop it happening?
No, they can't. For the average Russian to maintain their current standard of living, to be able to drive their car to work or to take a nice vacation, ordinary Russian citizens, they need gasoline. Car ownership in Russia is very high because it's a very large country that is very spread out. People drive places to get where they need to go. So the question you asked is, where is Russia's breaking point? And we have to give the Russian people credit. They have a tremendously high threshold for tolerating pain and suffering as a direct result of their own government. This is incredible. This war, what is currently happening, has never happened before, because Russia is choosing to destroy itself. This is a voluntary war that they could end at any point. Donald Trump himself has given Putin the best deal imaginable, the most favorable terms for Russia, terrible terms for Ukraine, and Putin is still choosing to reject it because he wants to go for more. Ukraine is not the final step. Obviously, Putin wants to reconstitute the Soviet Empire. Russian propagandists openly say this. And now Ukraine has the technology. They have the missiles and drones to strike back deep inside of Russia, and they know their pressure points. So these oil refineries, this is just the beginning of lights out in Russia. And once again, everyone needs to repeat this. Russia can stop this war at any time and probably still claim some kind of victory. But Putin is delusional at this point. He's not going to stop. He believes that his people will continue suffering and tolerating this. And I want to know what's going to happen. These internal media reports coming out of Russia of ordinary Russians reacting to their gas stations going empty. People can't drive their cars. They can't go to work. They can't have fun on the weekends or whatever. Yeah, I'm curious what the Russian people are going to do, as this situation for Russia will only get worse over the coming weeks.
How do you think Trump is perceiving all of this? Because it surprised me and a lot of people that he lifted restrictions on, that he basically stopped complaining about Ukraine doing long-range strikes. And it looks like they're now going to allow Tomahawk missiles to be given to Ukraine and used however this country wants them.
Why do you think Trump has done this U-turn? What do you think his psychology is right now?
Trump has been president for 9 or 10 months now, and he just looks incredibly weak and ineffective. And he knows this. He gave the red carpet treatment for Putin. U.S. soldiers on their hands and knees welcoming the dictator of Russia. And what did Trump get for that Alaska summit? Initially, in the chaos and confusion, Trump always just says whatever he says and makes stuff up, saying that Putin agreed to a one-on-one meeting or something, when the Russians agreed to nothing. All Trump did was legitimize Putin and de-isolate him. So I think Trump genuinely is confused and embarrassed because he thought he was giving something to Putin, this state visit in Alaska. And really, he got nothing. Not even an aluminum deal, not like maybe Russia didn't even buy billions of dollars worth of his crypto coin, which I'm sure he would be happy with. So there was that. There was then the state visits in the UK with King Charles. I'm sure that played a factor in that. European leaders are incessant. They will not leave Trump alone. They try to call him every day, talk to him every day, and say, you're on our side. You're not on the other guy's side. But I think something that really did bug Trump was this Shanghai cooperative meeting and then the military parade in Beijing. This image of Xi Jinping strutting down the head of the pack with all these dictators. I mean, there were democratic leaders there as well. It's a genuine economic cooperative. But then you had the military parade with Kim Jong-un on Xi's left and Putin on Xi's right. Politically or economically or ideologically, there's no reason for these three men to be shoulder to shoulder standing together. The message they were sending is hard power is the only thing that matters in the world today. Kim Jong-un, Putin, Xi, we've got a lot of soldiers. We've got a lot of nukes. We've got a lot of tanks. You should fear us and get out of our way whenever we want to attack our neighbors and redraw the maps. So I think Trump doesn't care about people invading other countries or redrawing the maps. He wants to do that. But he wants to be the top dog. He wants to be head of the pack. He wants... These are dictators that he's been sucking up to and flattering for a decade now. And he wants to be in charge. So I think Trump is genuinely offended and upset that all of these mass murderers don't want to be his best friend and treat him like the elder statesman or the father figure and a mentor. Like, Trump is just delusional this way. So then we got to the UN General Assembly, and I think Zelensky had a private meeting with Trump and showed him the maps, showed him the statistics, maybe showed him some videos that are not available to the public, saying, Russia's going down this year. We've got the drones, we've got the missiles, we're going after the refineries, we're potentially going after their thermal power plants. And it's going to be lights out for Russia by this December or January. We don't know how long it's going to take. So which side do you want to be on, Trump? Do you want to be on the winning side? Or do you want to continue sucking up to Putin when he just backhand slaps you every day in the media? Putin has no respect for Trump and will not show any. So yeah, I think Trump said, fine, I'll roll over and I'll stay out of it. I've not mentioned Trump once in my last 3 videos, and it feels great because everyone just wants Trump sell the weapons, share the intelligence, and then shut the hell up and let Ukraine and President Zelensky lead this war.
So I'm trying to imagine what it would look like in the coming months in Russia if these strikes keep happening at the frequency they've been happening. What do you think the worst case scenario would be for Russians, for the Russian government? Would it be that they physically run out of money in the bank and they can't pay soldiers to fight anymore? Would it be that they can't import weapons anymore? I mean, it looks like in the last 24 hours, they've installed this sort of new policy to make it so that there's no import taxes on gasoline, so they can start importing gasoline because the logistics are so messed up. If Russia were to be in the worst case scenario, how soon do you think it could happen? And what would it actually look like? Would it be soldiers literally just complaining because they're not getting paid that particular day that they're usually paid? They put down their guns, they start retreating. Like, if you're looking at it from a sort of bird's eye view, how does it actually play out?
It's really hard to get truthful information out of Russia because if you speak the truth, you're thrown in jail. Girkin is in jail. Prigozhin is dead. There's a guy named Maxim Kalishnikov who's been putting out videos recently, and he's a Russian propagandist. He's a Z-patriot, but he is screaming that things are getting bad and a different direction has to be taken. Otherwise, there will be catastrophic results. His own words were, these oil refinery strikes are a steel beam blow below the belt. And your question is, what's this going to look like? And we don't know because we didn't have iPhones and the internet in 1918. The Russian system completely collapsed. They had millions of soldiers on the front lines fighting the Germans, fighting the Austro-Hungarians, and there was an economic collapse in Russia. People were starving. It led to the Bolshevik Revolution, but let's not blame the revolutionists, because if the Tsar was still able to feed his people, they would have continued fighting. So your question is, how does this end? And I don't think we know. But generally, when soldiers stop getting paid, when they get reports from their wife and children back home that they can't afford food, they can't afford rent, they can't afford to survive, or they're somehow under threat. This is how the South in America's Civil War lost. The economic situation for the Deep South was so bad, with General Sherman's March to the Sea, make Georgia howl, burn every farm down, basically. As soon as Confederate soldiers were hearing that their farms were being burned and their wives and children were suffering, they just started deserting en masse. Desertion in the Russian military is already horrendous on informal reports. New restrictive measures have been in place. Checkpoints everywhere. The Russian internal military police are insanely corrupt and abusive. But it's to stop guys from going home and then just hiding out on a farm in Siberia until it all collapses and ends. But it is economic. You can say, I don't know the expression, hook, line, or whatever, but almost every man in the occupied territories did sign a contract, even if they were under pressure. And they are getting paid. There's been disruptions, people's salaries are stolen, there's all kinds of nefarious activity with this money. But generally, the vast majority, they are being paid. That money is going to their families back home to benefit them. That's why they continue to stay. So there needs to be a disruption in this chain, and as soon as Russian men in the occupied territories see no benefit to staying there, they're not patriots. They don't care about Putin. They don't care about the imperial project that he is forcing on them. They care about the money. They care about supporting their family back home. And once that is severely disrupted, yeah, I think they're going to lay down arms, surrender en masse, or just go back to Russia and then join a local gang in this new Mad Max dystopian future.
Well, talking about the people that are still fighting right now, what do you think the biggest weakness is in Russia's current military structure? Do you think it's command structures? Do you think it's logistics? Do you think it's motivation? Do you think it's training? Looking at all the battlefield information that you've seen in the last 3.5 years, what do you think the biggest weakness is right now there on the front lines?
Well, if you look at their advantages, they've had every advantage this entire war for 4 years, as far as manning, as far as, technological, naval, air superiority. Russia should have won this war a long time ago. So you have to ask the question, why haven't they? And I genuinely believe it's just the terrible quality of their soldiers and the predatory culture that Putin infuses throughout his society. This is a mafia state in which strength rules. Strength is the only thing that matters. So if you have a higher ranking position, if you have more friends, if you have better weapons, you just prey upon the weak. This is not how a modern military should be operating, where everyone is torturing everyone is robbing everyone is killing everyone else inside the Russian chain of command and structures in order to have your place in the pecking order. These videos you see on Telegram and Twitter of internal discipline within the Russian military, all of these men live in constant fear and terror of their own soldiers, of their own side. I don't see that on the Ukrainian side. I see much more camaraderie and cooperation. Ukrainian soldiers are allowed to use the internet, they're allowed to have phones, they're allowed to collaborate, they're allowed to communicate, whereas the Russian soldiers are not. They don't want any Russian soldier having access to the internet to show the world what the Russian military is actually like. And they don't want them collaborating. They don't want them cooperating. They want them competing and preying upon each other in order to keep this going. And it's absolutely horrendous. And I don't see how they're ever going to turn it around to win this losing war for them.
I think now that the Tomahawks look like they're going to arrive here in Ukraine, Russia's going to start putting out the same kind of nonsense about how they're going to nuke everyone, they're going to kill everyone, they're going to destroy the world over, put out graphics on their TV shows about missiles being fired into London and New York. And obviously we ignore all of that. It's always nonsense. But if Russia got really, really, really desperate, their refineries keep getting taken out, this continues to get more and more desperate, what do you think the most extreme thing they would actually do to Ukraine is? And what do you think they would actually, sort of in the next 6 to 12 months, if they genuinely feel like there's no other option, what do you think they would do?
I don't know. There's no benefit to using a nuclear weapon. The situation for Russia will only get worse. My job in the Air Force, I was a former nuclear missile operations officer. I've spent a lot of time thinking about nuclear theory, and I made a video, 6 months into this war. So this video is now over 3 years old. And I declared, Russia's not going to use a nuclear weapon because there is no benefit. Explain to me the economic, military, positional, whatever benefit. And yeah, they could just start murdering millions of people by nuking cities, but you then have to live in that nuclear wasteland. You have to deal with the fallout. You have to anticipate, would China and India then participate in sanctions? So there is no benefit, but Russia could try to, glass an open field, put off a tactical nuke in some random area. Maybe there's military positions there, but they wouldn't go for a major city. They would test nuke a smaller contained area just to see how the world would react. But even then, I don't think they would do that because Xi has told Putin to his face, under no circumstances can you use a nuclear weapon out of convenience in your war of choice. So the Chinese, and I think the Indians, probably Modi as well, has told Putin, no, you can't use a nuke. We can't have people nuking their neighbors while trying to steal their territory. That gives dangerous ideas to other potential neighboring nations to China and India.
I think finally as well, I just got back from Estonia quite recently and released a whole documentary about what Russia is doing with NATO, putting fighter jets over Estonia, 20 drones over Poland. Do you think this is just the beginning of Russia basically fucking with NATO, pushing the lines? Or do you think NATO are going to start getting their act together, start maybe shooting these things down? It looks like there was a drone taken off by a Russian cargo ship, something like this, in the last 24 hours. Do you think NATO will actually start taking serious action against Russia? Or do you think they're just going to keep pushing the line?
My subscribers do not like this answer, but NATO's response to all these provocations is, we're going to give Ukraine more money. We're going to give Ukraine more weapons. Why doesn't NATO shoot down the plane? Why doesn't NATO fight back? Why doesn't NATO do something? The answer is they are doing something. They're just giving Ukraine more money, and they're giving Ukraine more capabilities. Ukraine is the instrument. They're the weapons to retaliate against Russia. But I am convinced these provocations, Russia's trying to change the narrative or cause a provocation. These Russian MiGs that crossed into Estonian airspace for 12 minutes, they switched off their transponders when they did it, so it was obviously deliberate. And the timing is not coincidence. They did this days before the UN General Assembly week. Russia wanted those planes to be shot down. They didn't care if their pilots were murdered. They sent them through Estonian airspace days before the UN General Assembly because they wanted an international incident. They wanted to claim they were the victims. And the evil NATO killed their pilots and is causing provocations over a minor accidental air incursion. So Russia does this kind of stuff. They're losing and they don't know what else to do. There's all these theories tossed around, and I think they're all partially true. Russia is causing these provocations to cause internal division in our political societies, but they're also trying to scare people so that nations like Poland or Denmark or whoever will say, we shouldn't be helping Ukraine as much. We need to focus on our own air defenses. We need to focus on fortifying our own borders. So Russia doesn't really see a downside to just causing chaos. They're not in a great position, and they're willing to try things just to see in real time how it plays out.
It's actually a really nice answer about NATO and supporting Ukraine instead of getting into arms fires and mess, because it's actually kind of falling into Russia's trap. I literally never thought about it like that before, but that's a really good point. But when it comes to propaganda and Putin's narratives, Russian narratives, in the last week in the United Kingdom, we had a leader of Reform UK, the second largest political party at this point, who was also heavily involved in Brexit, UKIP, been found guilty for taking Kremlin cash and repeating talking points at EU Parliament. Very similar talking points to people like Phidias and statements like that. How prevalent and successful do you think, late stage 2025, right now, Russian narratives still are, say, in the United States, all around you, in your media and your politics?
Russian propaganda, especially in the United States, was more successful when Joe Biden was president. It was easy to fuel those deep state conspiracies about those evil Democrats. But now that Trump has been president, I've felt the difference as far as comments I get, interactions I get on social media, because this destroys the narrative that the CIA was behind the 2014 Maidan coup and this entire war is Joe Biden and Barack Obama's fault. If the CIA overthrew Ukraine's government, Viktor Yanukovych, in 2014, Trump could provide evidence. He could release some documents. Tulsi Gabbard could be, we've got the smoking gun. Joe Biden and the Democrats were responsible for this entire war. They overthrew Viktor Yanukovych. But of course, that's bullshit. It's not true. Victoria Nuland handing out cookies did not inspire 40 million people to overthrow their own government and have a democratic revolution. So it is very confusing for these bots, people who support Russia and believe their narratives, because Trump is president and he's not dispelled anything. And Trump has actually been very generous to Russia in the state visits and getting rid of, things like Voice of America and Radio Free Europe and ending aid. And Trump wants to be allied with Russia, and it's not happening. So the entire narrative that the Kremlin was pushing in America in right-wing politics doesn't make any sense to these people. They're very confused. And I definitely can detect that. Why hasn't the war stopped? The other narrative is that the United States is the only thing keeping Ukraine propped up. If we just end all military aid to Ukraine, then Russia will win. Russia will overpower the front lines and their tanks will roll into Odessa and Kharkiv and Kyiv. And it's been 10 months, Kaylin. The United States is no longer giving free money and free weapons to Ukraine, and the front lines have barely moved at all in 10 months. And I think this is another point going back to Trump. At this Alaska summit, I think Putin told Trump, hey, I'm going to have the rest of the Donbass within 2 months, and then I'll just stop. But Trump looks at the map and nothing's moving. So Trump gets frustrated that I think he actually even said this in a recent speech, that he was disappointed in Putin for not getting this war over by now. I think that was the exact words he used. It's so insane. But he admitted back in January, we're going to cut off all aid and support for Ukraine and just let Russia overpower them. Let Russia win. And Russia can't get it. They can't get the job done. This is very confusing for people who fall for Kremlin propaganda.
That's true. And I guess it falls into exactly what you said earlier as well, which is Russia's had every opportunity to actually defeat Ukraine, all the air superiority. They've had America basically turn against Ukraine and still are in this similar position. So I think that wraps up everything really, really well. Thank you so much for joining me. The last time we spoke, it was during the Alaska summit and you were reacting to that. And it feels like so much has changed since then. It looks like so much more stuff is going to happen in the next few weeks. But this has been really great, and it's always really great to catch up. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kaylin.
Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. My documentary about Kherson and the farmers that are being hunted there every single day comes out in the next 72 hours. So if you want to watch that, click subscribe to this channel. I'm going to be posting it on the weekend, and it's a really spectacular movie. And if you want to help the algorithm, please leave a comment, please hit like. I love reading the comments, I love reading feedback, and I'll see you next time.